Mental health in Aotearoa's youth. Before I start, I'd like to put a trigger content warning here for mental illnesses, suicide, eating disorders, body image, and sexual assault. If you feel these are heavy topics for you at this time, I understand if you wish to stop listening. Kia ora, hi, hello. Today I'm going to be talking to you about mental health in Aotearoa and why I solemnly believe it's something that should be talked about. But first, I should probably explain what mental health is, not just to me, but according to a few quick Google searches. Mental health is defined as a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. Mental illnesses can be caused by a wide range of issues. Some of the more popular ones are trauma, abuse, genes, and brain chemistry. You may think that mental illness is something that people can handle by themselves and that it doesn't really need any funding. And well, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but mental illnesses is something that if it isn't treated properly, it can lead to the person struggling so much with their mental health to kill themselves or isolate themselves and shut everyone out. It's something that there's a huge stigma around, as often people are scared to ask for help because they're scared they'll be told to get over it or that they're attention seeking. But something that also prevents people from seeking the help they need is the lack of funding. In 2019, the government promised that by July 2021, mental health organisations and counselling would be funded a whopping $145.3 million. That as of March 2021, funding had only reached a mere $67.4 million, less than half of what we were promised. The government has tried saying that COVID-19 had slowed the progress and that some contracts had been signed without the money being spent. But that is an excuse for such a huge lack of funding for a growing problem. When 92 people were asked if they thought mental health was important, the majority of people said yes. When further asked why, they often replied with answers implying that it affects your entire self, from the way you act, dress, to the way you think and get on with others. So just how many youth living in Aotearoa suffer from poor mental health? Well, I decided to do some of my own research. I started off by posting a series of questions on my Instagram story. I asked people to be honest with their responses so that I could get a clear understanding of what it's like for other people. I chose to do this because I couldn't find any studies that weren't outdated and were in the right age group. I firstly asked if they had ever struggled with mental health. I got around 288 responses and 86% of people said yes, while 14% of people said no. When asked what age they were when they started struggling with their mental health, I had 4 different categories: ages 0 to 5, 6 to 11, 12 to 16, and 16 plus. 3 people said ages 0 to 5, while 65 people said ages 6 to 11. 112 people said 12 to 16, and only 2 people said 16 plus. So I found that it is around school ages where people start struggling with their mental health. I asked them if they felt they had someone there supporting them, and the response I got was closer than I expected. Out of 143 responses, 59% said yes, while only 41% said no, which is definitely a statistic to worry about, as it shows that so many people feel alone in their own battle with mental illnesses, which is never the case. It's just finding the people that are there for you and will support you with it. When asked what drains your mental health the most, this is where I got a wide range of responses. I often saw school pop up, which is definitely something I'm sure many people can relate to. Will also relate to. Other causes included toxic people, sports, work, social media, bullying, inconsistency, body image, and the expectations of trying to be somebody you're not. When asked what they think might have caused their mental health to be this way, the responses I got were on a large scale, from school to sexual assault, abuse, trauma, bullying, and family loss, all the way to substance abuse and family issues. It's important to note that there wasn't one answer that only one person had, meaning multiple people are struggling with the same type of situations. Now, as I'm sure most of us are aware, Aotearoa, as we know it, has one of the highest youth suicide rates per capita. I also asked the people who had viewed my story if themselves or someone they knew had ever lost someone to suicide. Out of 275 responses, 232, 84%, said yes, while only 43, 16% said no. These are people aged 13 to 17, and so many of them have lost someone to suicide. It isn't acceptable. The government just sits there in silence, not really doing anything. Something that not many people do know is that it is actually illegal to tell someone to kill themselves. Whether the person attempts or not determines how long the person who said it can be in prison for. If the person doesn't attempt, the other can be jailed for up to 3 years. But if the person does attempt, the other can be jailed for up to 14 years. But once you did, it's a bit too late to really do anything. I decided to look into some of Aotearoa's mental health advocates. I heard some familiar names and some new ones. Some of the most popular were Jazz Thornton, Mike King, and @ThisIsGeorgie on Instagram. Others were Jess Quinn, Christine Philippa, and @LoveFromYourDads on Instagram. As someone who has also struggled with mental illnesses in the past, I've always looked up to Mike King and Jazz Thornton. My parents even brought me Jazz's book, Stop Surviving, Start Fighting, which is a book Jazz wrote about her personal struggle with mental health, abuse, trauma, and sexual assault, and how she got to where she is today. It's a great read, and I recommend it to anyone and everyone going through mental health struggles. One part of Jazz's book that really stood out to me was the quote, "As part of my recovery, I had to retrain my brain to change the way I thought and reacted to things." I can't exactly say how it relates to me, mostly because I'm not sure, but something that really interests me is the lack of education around mental illness. The only ones you really hear about in the news are anxiety and depression, not OCD, BPD, DID, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, eating disorders, PTSD, BDD, NPD, ASPD, ADD, social anxiety, MPD, and every other mental illness people struggle with. Unfortunately, I can't provide much information on these today, as I myself hadn't heard of some of them before. As I begin to wrap up my speech, I'd like to remind everyone that you are not alone. It is okay to ask for help. You don't have to be perfect 24/7. It's okay to not be okay. Someone is there for you. You are loved. People would much rather hear your story than hear about your death. You matter and are worth so much more than you think. Your mental health struggles are very valid. Good things take time. So, to finally conclude, be nicer to everyone around you, family, friends, classmates, staff, or even strangers. You never know what they're going through in their personal lives.